Welcome to Lydia Fenet's Claim Your Confidence, a podcast that will introduce you to the most powerful women in the world as they talk about their own confidence journey. No matter what obstacles you face, Claim Your Confidence will inspire you, motivate you, and give you a roadmap to live the life you want. So, are you ready to claim your confidence?
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Claim Your Confidence. I'm Lydia Fenet, and I'm so delighted to be sitting across from the incredible Dana Perino, the lead female anchor of the 2-hour morning news program, America's Newsroom, and the co-host on cable's most watched program, The Five on Fox News. She's the former White House press secretary under George W. Bush and the author of 3 books, so I'll have to keep up with her. I had the opportunity to meet Dana during COVID. I had an Instagram live and I received a reach out from her press team asking if she could come on and talk. And I can't even tell you how surprised I was, Dana, as you sit across from me, that someone who has such an incredible reputation and such an incredible career would consider joining my Instagram live. So I want to thank you for that, but also to thank you for being here today.
Are you kidding me? Like meeting you during COVID was such a highlight. I remember it like it was yesterday. And I was just saying, I remember learning about your book. I learned all about where you were during COVID, and because we had a Colorado connection as well.
Exactly.
And one of the most important things that I did during COVID was write the book, Everything Will Be Okay. Mm-hmm. And the subtitle is Life Lessons for Young Women from a Former Young Woman. And to talk to somebody else who had such a different career than mine, but an interesting path and a relentless desire to keep doing better, but to also trying to figure out your confidence along the way. So I feel like we were sort of a match made in heaven at that time.
It did feel like that. I felt like I was talking to someone I'd met many times over the course of my life. Well, what's interesting is this is, I think, probably around my 40th podcast now. And it's interesting when I ask people about their confidence journey. There's some people who say that they are born with confidence. There are other people who have sort of a meandering life that leads to their confidence. One thing I found so interesting when I was researching you is that you knew what you wanted to do when you were 6 years old. Yeah. You said, I want to work at the White House when you were 6 years old. And I think you're the first person who I can say honestly had any sense that that's what they would do over the course of their life. So let's start there. Okay. Who was Dana Perino as a child?
It's interesting. I was just as you were saying that, one of my co-hosts on The Five is Jesse Waters. Mm-hmm. And this guy was definitely born with confidence. Mm-hmm. And doesn't worry about anything. It's unbelievable to me. I always you are a freak of nature. I need to study you because I definitely was not born with confidence. The White House thing when I was 6 years old was way back in the day when my dad was going to an annual conference at the Society of Human Resource Management, called SHRM for those in the business. And that was when the companies would spend the money for you to take your spouse and your children with you if you wanted to go. This is ancient history. This used to happen, everybody. Yeah. And so my sister was too young to go. She was under 2. But my mom had a friend from high school who was working in the Carter White House. And she was a scheduler for Air Force One.
Wow. Who even knew that was a job?
Yeah, exactly. Well, he was going to this conference in D.C., and then we were there, and I went to the Lincoln's house, of course, all the monuments, but we got to go to the White House, and we got a tour. I remember seeing the red phone, which was like the nuclear phone at the time.
I remember seeing
and
that.
It had a huge impression on me.
Yeah.
And one of the things I write about in the book is, if you can, to give your children experiences where they can go and see things. Mm-hmm. In mentoring, there's a saying, you have to see her to be her.
Right.
But I also think that is true of travel. You know, I didn't come to New York City until I was 28 years old. I was super intimidated by New York. Still not great. I mean, I figured it out. I've been here 12 years, but I was so intimidated by it. But then when I got here, I realized, wow, I should have come way before for a few reasons. 1, I'm in media. Mm-hmm. 2, I love literature. And so much of it is based here in New York. I've read about New York my whole life, from narrative fiction when I was a kid all the way up to now. So when I was there at the White House, I remember we left on the plane on the night of the 4th of July.
Oh,
and we watched fireworks out of the window on the plane. So this is going to have a big impact, right?
Yeah.
My dad and my mom always flew the flag at our home in Denver. Mm-hmm. And I remember being on the milk crate that was just outside of our door. Mm-hmm. And standing there's a picture of me. And apparently I said, one day I'm going to work at the White House.
Oh.
No, I didn't know what I was going to do at the White House. And then fast forward, I actually didn't really think I would work at the White House, but I did get there.
But I love the idea that you probably also thought that at the White House there were fireworks every night after having seen the plane, because I have a 6-year-old.
I remember watching them over the Washington Monument. I'll never forget that.
I can just imagine.
It's like one of my earliest childhood memories.
Yeah, I can see that, how that would have such an impression. And Washington, you really probably became like a Disneyland kind of fairy tale in your mind. So you grew up, as you were alluding to, in Colorado. And throughout your time in Colorado, you were not as confident as you are now, obviously. No. But tell us about Dana as a young girl.
So as I was thinking about this podcast, I really was wondering if I could explain this, and I'm going to give it a shot. I think there are 3 ways that you gain confidence. And if I look back to my childhood, there is the spiritual, mental, and the physical confidence that you need to build over time. So yes, we were in Denver, Colorado, but my dad grew up on a ranch in Newcastle, Wyoming.
Right.
We spent all of our vacations there, right? I never went to Europe. I didn't see the ocean until I was 16. Like when vacation time was driving to the ranch, and that was my favorite place on earth. I still love it there. My family still ranches in that area. My uncle runs it with my 2 cousins, and I was the only girl. I was the oldest grandchild. My grandfather's huge influence on my life. And I think about that location and finding that spirituality inside. Plus, my parents were avid churchgoers in the Lutheran church. And I was very good at memorization. And you could earn little ticket points to go into the store, the church store, if you could memorize, let's say, the Lord's Prayer,
like the Bible
for example.
Verses and things like that.
And the Beatitudes. I loved the Beatitudes.
Oh God, what an amazing way to get kids to go to church.
So I would memorize all those things, and that's so I could get prizes. I loved to achieve things and to get the reward. Like I was like Pavlov's dog early on. So the spiritual side of things was finding a way to, one, ground myself in faith, and to pair that with the spirituality of nature and God's earth. On the physical side of things, I was enrolled in gymnastics early on. And finding a way to be able to move your body. Bodies are awkward. They're just awkward.
Yeah.
And they grow and they change. And especially for women, it's like, what is going on here, right, over time? And then you realize how important that is. But you gain in confidence in terms of balance, posture, and being able to move. I think that's really important. And I don't think we actually think about confidence in a physical way enough, because then we try to get it later on in life.
Yeah.
And then on the education front, or the mental front, when I was in 3rd grade, my dad started a tradition with me. I had to read the Rocky Mountain News and the Denver Post every night before he got home from work. And I had to be prepared to discuss 2 articles before dinner. And he would play devil's advocate of whatever it was I chose, or he would gently try to get me to be a critical thinker. And I remember one time, Lydia, that years later, I was on Marine One, and the president was grappling with an issue. He was asking his key advisors there on the chopper what we thought. I knew that I was the only one who had the opinion that I had, and that the guys that were on the chopper had a different point of view. And he asked each of us what it was. And was like, okay, well, here's what I think and here's why. And that's sometimes, imagine like you're at the White House, do you think that wouldn't be scary? But in a way, it's like, are they going to judge me for having this different opinion?
Yeah.
And I'll never forget when we landed, 43 looked at everybody and he said, she's exactly right.
Wow.
And I've had this flashback to the kitchen table with my dad.
Yeah.
And how important it is for a young girl to feel able to express herself in front of dominant male figures.
Yeah.
If that's your dad or your teacher or your boss or even the commander-in-chief.
Yeah.
It makes a difference. You have to start early.
Yeah. You have to start early. It's very true.
Yeah, so those are the 3 sort of pillars that I think, like, if I were to look back, that's where the confidence building starts. But it's a nonstop process.
Yeah, absolutely. And it evolves and ebbs and flows.
Yes, and then I think also joining the speech team. When it was clear that I was not going to the Olympics for gymnastics, I had to find something else to do. And I knew I wanted to be in media, so I joined the speech team, and that was the best thing, because then I actually got to go to college on a scholarship.
And you went to college in Colorado?
Yes, at the University of Southern Colorado, now part of the state university system. And I just gave the commencement address there.
Wow,
and got
congratulations.
the 2nd ever honorary doctorate from the school, which when they said they were giving me an honorary doctorate, I said, guys, I will come give you a speech. Like, I don't need the fake doctorate. It was a moving moment. They thought about it very hard.
Yeah.
There was a vote. They made it very meaningful. And I did need to just sit there for a moment and be grateful that I'd had all these opportunities that had led to some accomplishments that were being recognized.
Obviously, there's a lot to be said about many different things in your career, but I think one of the most impressions that I get, even just having this conversation now, is how much drive you have and how much you constantly challenge yourself. I don't know if you remember saying this a couple of minutes ago, but you said, well, when I realized I wasn't going to the Olympics, when I realized I wasn't going to the Olympics.
I wanted to be Kathy Rigsby, which you might not remember Kathy Rigsby, but I loved her. She was an amazing American gymnast. She wrote a book. I remember getting this book out of the library when I was in third grade. And then, everybody else got much better at gymnastics than I did.
Yeah, but the fact that you even thought the Olympics was the end goal was what it shows a lot about the way that you think about life. I also read somewhere that you were a DJ in college in order to bolster your resume from 2 to 6 a.m.
Yes. So back then, if you wanted to get into television, you had to start in radio. That was like the most logical progression. Yeah. And it's actually great training. Peggy Noonan, who is an amazing columnist and just amazing woman overall, probably a good guest for this podcast.
Like paging Peggy Noonan?
She started in radio, and she worked for Dan Rather at CBS Radio. It's where she learned to write copy real tight.
Yeah.
And then she went on to be a speechwriter at the White House. So radio was a great path for her. For me, I just said, I don't want to do radio after I graduate. I want to have that simultaneously. And there was a school station, but it was kind of filled up, and it wasn't a commercial station. But there was one station in town, KCCY FM 96.9, Pueblo, Colorado Springs, which I'm doing a terrible...
I don't know. That sounded pretty good to me. The fact that you can remember that is amazing.
It was only overnights, 2 a.m. to 6 a.m., minimum wage, $3.35 an hour.
Wow.
And I am not an evening person at all. I can get up at 4 in the morning and be ready to go. But you asked me to stay up at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock a.m., terrible. And at the time, I didn't listen to country music, or I hadn't in years. So I had a lot to learn, and it's very isolating. You were just by yourself. Now, today it's all done by computer, and pretty much you don't even need anybody there. But at the time, it was a challenge, and then I really liked it. And then I moved up to the 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. That was on Sundays. And I would do sometimes 6 to 10 on a Saturday or a Sunday night. It didn't last too long. I don't think anybody remembers me doing that. And if they do, they are very kind because nobody has made fun of me.
So you had that training in radio, and then it was TV for you from that moment on.
So yes, and I went to a smaller college. I went on a speech team scholarship, but one that also had practical life skills that you could gain. So there was the public television station, the PBS station for Southern and Western Colorado was on our campus. So I got to do production. I did producing for a show called Standoff, which was basically like Crossfire in a way. And then I did a show called Capitol Journal. That's what it was called. And I would go to Denver's part-time legislature on a Monday and a Tuesday. And I would do interviews. And I would come back and I'd report the news on a Friday night. And Lordy, if there are tapes, I just hope that there are no tapes that ever come out of it. But I had wonderful professors that encouraged me. And I went to graduate school for public affairs reporting. And this is pretty confidence shaking. Actually, I start doing the work in local television and realize I don't want to do this. And that blew me out of the water because I thought, wait, I spent all this money and time to get to this point, and now I don't want to do it.
And so what do you do at this point?
Well, I called my dad and said, I don't think I want to do this. Part of it was that I was just shocked at what I had never known that there was really media bias. And I was just so taken away that things were not fair. And now that sounds so naive now, obviously. But I called my dad, and unconditional love is a wonderful thing. And he said, that's not a problem. So when this is happening to me at 22, I thought that the world was ending. I thought that I didn't have a future, that I would never get to work in television, that my horizons ended basically at the end of the street. And my dad, having obviously more experience in life, knew that you'll start working and then something else will happen and you'll find your way. And so I went back to Colorado. I ended up doing what every good college graduate or graduate student does. I lived in my parents' basement and waited tables at Governor's Park Tavern in Denver. And then a job was opening at the Colorado State Capitol as a deputy press secretary for the Colorado Senate president. And I thought, well, maybe I'll try for that and see. Because at the time, I loved watching George Stephanopoulos and the West Wing and all of that. Mm-hmm. And then one of those congressmen, he was a congressman at the time, but he had been a state legislator. This is important about networking because that can help build your confidence.
You know, we both love networking.
The state legislator that would be willing to let me interview him every Monday and Tuesday when I was up there to do Capitol Journal. I contacted his office and said, would it be okay if I used him as a reference to apply for this job in the Colorado State House? Mm-hmm. And his chief of staff said, oh, are you looking for a job? You should come work for us. And I thought she meant back in Pueblo, Colorado. And I was like, no, I'm not.
I'm not going back.
That's not my plan.
Yeah.
She goes, no, it's in D.C. And that changed everything.
Yeah. I want to go back to what you said, because I think it's so important for any of our listeners. And you wrote such a wonderful book about this in your sort of quarter life crisis moment, as you were saying, for those people who are in their 20s who have that moment where they realize that they're not doing what they want to do and make that move.
And they haven't met the guy, and they don't have the house, and they don't have the plan. Yeah. All of that.
Give them some advice.
So I was the classic case. I was living in D.C. I had a great group of friends, both that I worked with on Capitol Hill, and I was part of the Lutheran Church of the Reformation, which is just 2 blocks from the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. Wonderful singles group. And we did all sorts of things together. We traveled together. We rode mountain bikes together. We volunteered once a week together to mentor young kids that came over from Anacostia. And I loved it. But I had not been on a date in a long time. I also was a little disenchanted with the Republican Party at the time. Mm-hmm. I was also unhappy with D.C., the Monica Lewinsky scandal. I don't like saying that. That was a shorthand for it.
Yeah.
That whole episode had happened, and none of the women's groups stood up for her. So I was just shocked, and my nose was out of joint about Washington, D.C. But really, also, I had not even met anybody. And I longed to travel. Mm-hmm. I had not, as I said, I didn't even see the ocean until I was 16.
Yeah.
I never went backpacking in Europe. None of that had ever been a part of my life. And I started thinking about what I wanted to do. I could seriously consider the Peace Corps. Mm-hmm. And I still would maybe like to do that one day.
Well, there's still time.
Yes. Or if it's not the Peace Corps, but something like that. My husband and I have a desire to do that. And I was thinking about leaving Capitol Hill. Wasn't sure what I was going to do. And I got on an airplane one day, and I just sat next to this guy, British guy. I know your mother is British. The accent works wonders. Cute. I wasn't wearing my AirPods because they didn't exist at the time. I had a hardcover book. So did the seatmate next to me. And I talked with this guy. His name was Peter McMahon. And 9 months later, I moved to England, and we'll have our 25th wedding anniversary this year.
I love that story so much.
It's a great story.
It's a great story.
And, but also, even then, I had a lack of confidence when now I'm in love, and this is so great, but he's 18 years older than me, and what are people going to think? And just all that churn that undermines your confidence when you think about other people and what they... One thing I've learned the most about to that quarter life crisis thing is, first of all, it's all going to work out. If you're an educated American woman, you won the lottery of life. And right now, you just have to decide how hard you want to work. What do you want to do? Of course, it's not going to be that easy. There are going to be obstacles, and everything will be okay if you put in a little effort. It'll make it happen. But mostly, we are held back by worrying about what other people think about us.
Definitely.
It drives me crazy. Yeah. Like, why did I think that anybody was thinking about me?
Yeah, it's so true.
And when you start to realize that everyone's going through something, you don't know what they're going through. So you should always be kind to people in your eyes, and the eye contact, and a hello, and a secret little prayer for somebody as you even walk by the street, because you don't know.
Yeah.
And you need that kind of kindness coming back to you as well. But that everything will be okay, especially if you're an educated American woman. Can I tell you a story?
Please.
Oh my gosh, this
means.
happened in the White House. Talk about like a confidence moment. So now I'm the press secretary, and it's 2007 or 8. And I wake up in the morning, and there are a gazillion messages. And now I get up at 4:12. Not an alarm, but my alarm was 4:20. But I always woke up at 4:12.
That's so
I don't know
funny.
why. It just happened. And
always prepared as well.
yes, I'm always like afraid I'm going to sleep through my alarm.
Yeah, of course.
So I look at my phone, and there's messages from Reuters and AP and 25 from CNN because they could never coordinate. Fox, CBS, ABC, everybody is calling me because Prime Minister Maliki of Iraq had sent troops into an area called Basra. Basra was a place that was just a disaster. And the majority was just torturing the minority in that area. The British were in charge of that area. And the world had been asking Maliki to do something. They didn't want to do it for him, but you have to do something. And I had woken up, and Maliki had sent troops into Basra. And the questions I was getting from the press were, does President Bush support Maliki? And I said, guys, I just woke up. Let me take a shower. I'll get back to you. But the pressure was just building. I don't know why I felt so much pressure. But the reporters were like, I need to know now. The deadline's happening. And of course, Iraq is 8 or 9 hours ahead of us. So they're filing in Europe and they need these stories. And I also felt that President Bush needed to be on the record on it. But now I'm like, do I call him at 5:30 in the morning? Even though he was usually up at that time, I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to try to stave this off for a bit. And Lydia, I don't know what got into me. But because President Bush let me be with him at all times when there were important things going on, and I had been in every Situation Room meeting that he had with Maliki and with Karzai as he helped try to get them to be better leaders, I felt like I knew what he would say. So I give an on-the-record quote that says, President Bush supports Prime Minister Maliki and reminds everyone that this is exactly what the world was wondering if Maliki had the guts to do.
Wow.
On the record, White House spokesperson. Within minutes, there's
a call
now
from the
my
White House.
staffers are at the White House and they're sending what we call clips. So it's articles. This is email day. So email. There's no Twitter.
Yeah.
Okay. Quoting people like General David Petraeus, who expressing a lot of concern about how Maliki did this. Secretary of State Condi Rice expressing concern about Maliki. Secretary of Defense Robert Gates disappointed. And I was like, wow.
Oh my goodness.
I could actually be fired today.
Yeah.
It still gives me, even though I know how it turned out, it gives me like a stomach ache. So I go to the White House. I usually had a meeting at 6:30 a.m. With the National Security Advisor. But that day, his office was like, he's too busy right now. I was like, okay, great. And I go back to my desk.
You're like, I might not have a job, so that's okay.
This could be it. This could really be it. And I go to senior staff meeting. We were prompt people. It started at 7:30 a.m. And chief of staff is late. You can't start without the chief of staff. I'm sitting there, oh my gosh. And I have the AP story with my quote in it with me. And then from the Roosevelt Room, by the part of the Oval Office, there's 2 entrances to the Roosevelt Room, one from the chief of staff's office and one from the president's office, and they're on opposite ends. And Josh Bolton comes from the president's part, and he doesn't even sit down, and he puts his hands on the chair and he says, if anyone in this room has said that President Bush does not support Prime Minister Maliki, they are wrong.
Oh.
And I was like, I said it.
I said
it. Of course, like I need like the gold star on the refrigerator. But I was like, he's on the record. I was like, he's on the record supporting him. And so then Josh could take that. He took it back to the president. I mean, what a risk that was, honestly. And also kind of reckless. Looking back, I'm like, wow, that was not appropriate. But I guess it was just the confidence that I had based on the experience and the access that I had had with him. Fast forward. At the very end of the administration, I arranged some interviews President Bush could do with Charles Krauthammer, the late Charles Krauthammer. And I was just there sitting in the background as they had their conversation. And at one point, Charles Krauthammer said, Mr. President, when did you know the surge was going to work? And he says, Charles, that's an excellent question. Thinks about it for a minute. And then he says, it was the day Maliki sent troops into Basra.
Wow.
And nobody was with me. Except for her.
Amazing.
And he remembered.
That is an amazing story.
And so we have such a close connection, not just because of that story, but I think that nothing can give you confidence like the commander-in-chief.
Yeah, that story is, I mean, I have full body chills listening to that.
Me too. I still think I'm going to get fired.
I still think can I still lose my job?
And Condi Rice might recommend me get fired.
I mean, that entire story arc, I mean, I really felt like I was trying to jump across the table to find the end of that story. Yeah. I didn't know how it was going to end up. Yeah. But I think that confidence must be what brought you to that moment. Because at the beginning of all of this, you're going into the White House. You were not at first the press secretary.
No, I was happy to be.
You were just happy to be there.
Mm-hmm.
But what does it feel like on that first day to take the podium?
Oh, it's the worst. Honestly, it's the worst. Actually, the most nervous I've ever been in my life is probably that moment, followed by the time I did Celebrity Jeopardy for charity. That actually might have been worse. Because at least at the White House, I knew what I was talking about.
Yeah, but the stakes were a little higher on one side than the other.
I didn't start a war or anything like that. One thing that's pretty funny about the first week I briefed, this is actually, I'm still deputy, but Tony Snow, the late Tony Snow, had to have some surgery. So I filled in for him for 2 weeks. And I'll never forget he was 6'5". Well, you can't see on the TV. I'm not. I'm 5 feet tall. And there was a podium that had been built for Tony Snow. And I was asked, do you want me to have them build you a new podium? I was like, no, it's only for 2 or 3 weeks.
I'll
just stand on a box.
Can I have that milk crate?
It was the apple box. Yeah, the milk crate. That actually probably would have helped. I was on a little apple box. I was like, it's fine. So the first week, I was mostly concerned about what I was going to say, the questions I was going to get, and what I was going to wear.
Of course, yeah.
And I didn't have a big budget. Nobody helped me with wardrobe, nothing like that. So I get through the first week. I didn't get fired. Everything went pretty well. And they come to me on the Friday night. Ma'am, we really think you need to have a new podium next week. I said, oh my gosh, no, that's crazy. We're traveling a couple of days. Tony might even be back early. It's fine. They said, well, actually, NBC News showed us their camera shot from the back of the room. And when you're at Tony Snow's podium, on that little apple box, the sign above your head, the seal, it doesn't say the White House. It says the White Hoe. For a week. Thankfully, there was no Instagram at the time.
Yes, exactly. And no Twitter.
And you know what? Good for Rodney, the cameraman at NBC News, who was looking out for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Good for Rodney indeed.
Love him.
So after the White House, where did you go next?
I went to Africa. My husband and I spent 6 weeks there. We did a little bit of safari and then a lot of volunteering at a faith-based PEPFAR site, PEPFAR being the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. So we were in South Africa, and I loved that month. It was a chance to regroup physically a little bit. I was a wreck.
I'm sure.
Oh my gosh, I had a ringing in my ear that lasted 2 years. I remember I got that black eye in Baghdad from the microphone stand hitting me when the shoes were thrown at the president.
Oh my goodness.
I had a numbness in my arm from my elbow down. That was after 3 years of BlackBerry work. Nobody could type an entire press release like me on a BlackBerry. I was really good at it. And so we went there, but I really needed to reset my heart and my priorities.
Yeah.
And I called it perspective with a capital P. And I remember that day that I left the White House on our way to Africa to the airport. I leaned my head back in this car and said, nothing I do for the rest of my life will ever be that important or that hard. And it's true. It gave me a lot of perspective. And then to be able to go and see the generosity of Americans who had done this incredible effort to help stop the spread of HIV/AIDS and to start curing people. There was an entire generation of people that were saved by the American people, and it was wonderful to be a part of that. So we did that, and I came back. I did join Fox News as a contributor at the time. Yeah. I can't believe that I've been there since April of 2009. It's funny, many people have been there since the beginning, 25, 26 years ago. So I still feel a little new.
You're like, I'm the newbie
Fox
here.
In a way, even though this will be my fourth or fifth election.
Yeah.
Fourth election that we do together. So what's amazing now is that I'm actually doing everything now that I wanted to do back then. So in the morning, I get to give the news from 9 to 11, and then at 5 o'clock, I get to analyze the news. And I'm on the election analysis team. I'll never forget, though, years ago, Jay Wallace, the president of Fox News, asked me, what did I want to do on election? And I said, well, I really want to be a part of debate night or election night. And I think it was a debate was coming. I said, I really want to be a part of the debate. He thought I wanted to moderate the debate. Oh. We laughed so hard. I'm like, oh, no, I just want to be on the panel.
Yeah,
that's all I
don't
want.
need to moderate the debate.
No,
Thank you so much.
In fact, I actually really don't want to moderate the debate. So I've been on the election panel, and it is a great joy of mine. We have so much fun, smart people. Yeah. High stakes, wonderful support. The technology has changed a lot. The country's changed.
Yeah.
And it's going through a lot, and we can be there. And we take our job seriously, but we don't take ourselves seriously. So we have a lot of fun, too.
It's got to be important, especially in this day and age.
Oh, you got to keep a sense of humor.
Yeah.
Or you'll cry.
Absolutely. And I do sometimes wonder, I mean, you have a job where you are reporting the news, which obviously, since you started in 2009, is very different, like what you're reporting and the things that the globalization, the unbelievable advances in tech and social media.
Well, even like, if you think about what we used to talk about in terms of the war on terror.
Yeah.
What advancements America has made in beating back the extremism and radical Islam. I mean, not that the threat isn't still there, but it is greatly diminished.
Yeah.
And we're in a much better position. So you think of the summer of ISIS when they were threatening to behead people. I mean, that was a lot. And also, I would say the withdrawal of Afghanistan, I was pretty affected by that, mostly because, we made promises to all the Afghans who would help us in the war, and we didn't keep it.
Yeah.
And that really bothers me to this day.
What do you do? And I read another article about how the Wyoming ranch for you was such a huge part of your life in terms of being able to be positive. So what do you do to reset when you are submerged in this world where things are not always positive. Like, what do you do as a person?
There are some days, but usually some Fridays where I'm like, wow, that was a lot. Because news, like nobody ever reports that the planes landed safely at LaGuardia today. The news is the news because there's usually something going on that is negative. So I am a big believer for myself. I need to move a lot.
Yeah.
So I'll ride my Peloton. I know that you ride the Peloton.
Love a Peloton.
And I'll do something every day. I usually do something 3 times a day. So it might not be a lot, right? So, but I'll try to even though I have a very early morning, try to do something in the morning, either a ride, a strength training class, or a yoga. I take a private Pilates. Actually, that's my investment in myself. I do that twice a week. And also, I am fulfilling a lifelong, now this year's New Year's resolution. Peter and I have started taking dance lessons.
Oh, so we'll expect you on America's Dance Show.
No, I told them, I'm like, no, I'm not going to. In fact, when I first...
you heard it here, guys.
I used Thumbtack to find the dance studio. And I told the person that we went with, I said, oh, Misha, we just want 5 lessons, and then we'll be on our way. Yeah. That's all we need. He says, okay, great. I'm like, okay, good. Well, I think we're on our 15th lesson now, partly because there's a lot to learn.
There's a lot to learn,
And also, we really love it.
Oh, that's great.
And it's you're off your phone for an hour. Yeah. You're with some nice people. And of course, in New York, you can't just take lessons from some guy who knows how to do the foxtrot.
These are Broadway dancers or bust.
This guy's the world Mamba champion. And he was on Dancing with the Stars. And he was, You're
like, I'm looking for Bill who's 95 and really loves a cha-cha.
And
that's it.
It's a great way to meet other New Yorkers who are not in the news business or politics. And I really love it. So movement to me is one of the most important things. And also discipline. Yeah. I need to go to bed early. And it sucks sometimes. Yeah. Because it's, especially when it's light out, I want to watch all the shows. Yeah. I want to be a part of that. I love to read. Yeah. And I sometimes have to force myself to put that book away. Yeah. Just like when my mom would say, turn the light out.
I was the same too. My mom was always like, and then I would find you at 11:45 p.m. still reading by the crack of your closet light.
Which is why I need reading glasses now.
Yeah, I know. I'm starting that journey too. I remember you saying something when we spoke on the Instagram Live where you talked about movement and the importance, especially in your career, not doing a sport where you could access your phone, and you had taken up tennis.
Oh yeah,
because you couldn't have your phone.
Lessons,
yeah,
yes.
And I remember that
last year I got most improved at the club, though it's not an award that they like give out. It was just whispered in my ear.
Oh yeah, because there's competition at any club.
And that meant so much to me, and I didn't have too much learning loss over the winter. So playing again and again, meeting people that I wouldn't necessarily meet otherwise. The clinic that we do Saturday morning is 90 minutes. You know what's interesting? If you get off your phone for that long, there's not much that happens.
I know. It is incredible. I feel the same way.
You don't have to keep looking at it all the time.
It's so true.
I have it on. Yeah. It's on, especially because in the news business, for example, the strength of Jimmy Carter. I have been carrying around the Jimmy Carter folder when they announced that he was going into hospice care and was no longer going to do any of the cancer medications since February. Yeah. I take it with me. I take it with me to the tennis lesson just in case. They need to call me so I could do a phoner. Last week I forgot. And I was like, this guy's going to live forever.
Oh my gosh. Should we all be Jimmy Carter? I think so.
I guess.
So one last question. I know we lost the beloved Jasper.
Yes.
I'm so sorry about that.
That was a tough one.
That was a tough
America's
one to watch.
dog.
America's dog. Yeah. But now you have Percy.
Yes. And okay, well, I think that's the other thing when you ask me, how do I deal with it? I have a wonderful husband. I have a great group of friends. But I think that having a dog is so critically important, at least for me. Yeah. It's somebody who doesn't care at all that I got to interview Ron DeSantis this morning or whoever it might be. Yeah. Henry, our dog before that, when I was at the White House, he was with me from age 26 when I first got married to Peter till 40. And you think, I didn't know George W. Bush. I had never been to all these places in Europe. I had never worked at Fox News. I had never lived in New York City, and that dog was with me through all of that.
And Jasper, loved you regardless.
Yes, exactly.
Before
they don't
success.
care.
Yeah, they don't care.
And there's something about the joy of a dog. And at night, this dog, Percy, he loves to play ball. So we just throw the ball 100 times down the hallway, and he brings us so much joy. And it can bring a family together, especially some days are tough or sharp words can be exchanged with people that you love, but the dog always softens the edges.
So true. So I love that you have announced that you're 50.
Yeah, it's 51 now.
You're at the top of your game.
I feel like it, yeah.
And I shouldn't even say the top of your game. You are, I like to say, on the peak of a mountain, and there's another one in the future. What do we look for with Dana? Are there new books coming? Like, tell us what's coming next for you.
So I had a lunch earlier this week with a woman who had won a Zoom thing with me, but she's a very successful businesswoman out of Australia. And she had won this charity auction thing to have lunch with me.
But yeah, I sell these all the time, by the way.
Yes, of course you do.
This is what I do.
So I was so shocked. What she said, how can I help you? What's next? If your industry gets disrupted tomorrow, how are you going to capitalize on your brand? What are we doing? How are you making money? I was like, whoa.
I love this woman.
Ma'am, I don't know the answers to any of these questions. But I realized, like, oh, wait, maybe she's right. I need to think about things because I really love what I do right now. I have a wonderful colleague in Bill Hemmer every morning. Who wouldn't want to work with Bill Hemmer every day? He's cheerful in the morning. He's very good at what he does. We have a blast. I never thought I would get up at 4:30 in the morning again for anybody, but I do it for this show, and I love America's Newsroom. And The 5 is the number 1 show, and not on all of cable, sometimes in all of news, or all of television on some occasions, especially when there's no sports.
Yeah.
And I really love what I do, so I don't have a plan for what's next.
Yeah.
I am going to do a new podcast for the political season.
Oh, exciting.
Yes, but I'm being very efficient. It's going to be one where I'm going to get briefed by somebody smart that I want to talk about for things I need to know so that they can tell me. So then it's like actually getting a briefing from smart people.
How fun is that?
I think it's great. I think it's so efficient. That's what I'm looking for. The one thing I do want to do after the 24 election is go back to mercy ships. I don't know which African country they'll be docked in. They're in Senegal right now with a brand new ship. It was a huge capital campaign of which you know a lot about. That ship is now underway and it is gorgeous. So I'm looking forward for a big trip there. It might take a big group.
Well, I know I will continue to follow your success along the way.
And yours. I mean, I love meeting you in COVID. And we all got to think about what happens if we get disrupted. What's next?
Yeah, exactly. It's a good question. And I always leave the end of the show with a question. So I'll leave it there.
Okay,
If your
perfect.
industry or your life gets disrupted, what's next? Start planning. It's always good to have a plan. As Mae Musk says in one of my favorite books, a woman makes a plan. So Dana, thank you so much for your time. I know you've come straight from the newsroom, so I appreciate
thank you. I loved
being
it. Thanks
here.
for letting me take a trip down memory lane.
Absolutely. And to Joe and to Rockefeller Center, thank you so much for having us in Newsstand Studios. It's been a bustling day here.
Yeah.
Please stop by if you're ever in One Rockefeller Plaza. I'm Lydia Fenet. This is Claim Your Confidence, and I can't wait to be with you again next week.